Welcome back to Worth the Effort Woodworking in our Tool Fool Friday series. And this week we're probably going to discuss one of the most unsung heroes in my shop. It's a tool I touch almost on a daily basis when I'm working at the bench, multiple times. And it's one of those things that once you build one, this is going to be a shop-made tool, you won't realize how nice it is having it available. It's a total convenience. And that is the setup jig for my sharpening jig. Now, some of y'all might remember a couple years ago I was making these and selling these on my website, lost a bundle on them, but it's kind of an all-in-one setup, and this is one that I use whenever I travel just because it's so convenient. It's not 100% of the flexibility of what I use on a daily basis here, but it gets me there. And it has these setup blocks on the end. Not as convenient to use on a daily basis. What I have been using, well, you can look back at my videos 10 years ago. I republished one last little while back as a rerun. In the background is that sharpening setup. And that consists of my DMT stones. I used to use the Waterstones, and personally, in my opinion, the Waterstones are a lot more efficient and they actually do give you better results. But the convenience factors of diamond stones and their cleanliness, not having to reflatten them, it's really nice having. I bought them because I was teaching students and I didn't want them to have to worry about those extra steps to go over sharpening. So since I now have, it's just my go-to right here. Above that one, I have a little box. FYI, the stones, they are super fine, fine, and medium. Corresponds to 8,000, 4,000, 1,000, and I want to say 400 or 800, I'm not quite sure. Up here I have a box with commonly used accessories to it. Little wheels, angle gauges, sharpening rouge for the leather, that kind of stuff. And right here is a DMT plate that I actually use to flatten Waterstones, but I keep it here because it's great as a very coarse stone. I think it's 250 grit equivalent for whenever I drop a chisel and nick a corner, it'll remove material fairly quickly. But this is my setup, and whenever I want to sharpen a chisel, I basically come over, I grab my gauge, I drop it in there. If I'm going to be using a gauge, which I do about half the time, I just like it because it's a reset. You know, a lot of times I can just come over here, grab a chisel, just find the click, lift it up a little bit, few swipes, take off the burr and get back to work. But you do that 4 or 5 times, then having a jig to reset everything is just nice and you don't have to think about it. And then we come to the tool I'm talking about today in the video. These little things right here. Easy access. I come over here, I drop it down, I push it down, it sets the distance from the edge, which then corresponds to the angle. And because if you want a different angle, you need a different distance, I actually have 2 that I use commonly. I pretty much set all my chisels to 25 degrees, even though my working angle is probably closer to 27, 30 degrees. Not that big a deal. And I set all my plane blades to 30 degrees, except for a few specific ones, which I end up hand sharpening. And it's just nice and easy. I grab them. These are size white. I much prefer this size, which is the ones we're going to make today, to this one right here. I just find this one a little bit wider and less comfortable. And making these is a great exercise in very precise hand tool cutting. Now, my motivation for making a new set is I got a new side mounting honing guide that I'd like to try out. This is the one that I've been telling people to use for years on end, just because they are dirt cheap. It's a knockoff of the original clips, which I don't think they make anymore. And basically you have a straight on this side and a curve on that side, so that whenever you squeeze a chisel, it will pinch it on this side in the middle and contact it on the full length on the other side, and that's what squares it up. There are modifications you can do to these. I have a past video where I showed them to make them even better, but I've gotten to the point, I give these away quite often because they're only like $8 or $12. So I'm just using them stock nowadays. The downside, in my opinion, is this short distance of the wheel, because if you're using it for a chisel, it's very easy for a new woodworker to kind of pivot it up. See what's happening right there? Pivot it over and you take away a corner or something like that as you're getting used to it. You really have to focus on putting all your pressure in the very center. Now that sounds like a negative with a chisel, but it can be a positive with a plane blade, because if you can put a little more pressure on this side and a little bit more pressure on that side, that gives you pretty much the perfect camber. But there, you know, everything has its pluses and minuses. This one I'm trying out is from Lee Valley, their new Veritas one. And one thing I liked about it is, even though it does have an upper and lower, you don't have to use an upper and lower. So I can basically make one of these jigs for all the blades I want to have 25 degrees, another one for all the blades I want to have 30 degrees, whether they are a hand chisel or, you know, a high angle blade on a bevel up plane or anything like that. So let's go ahead and pull some stock. Notice that of these two, I much prefer this one. I actually like the extra thickness in the hand. I feel safer using it, having my hand farther away from here. There is no reason why you couldn't make one like my dovetail markers for setting all the angles. Just have a different angle on each side like this. Very easy to do. And do another angle here, another angle there, another angle there. But your hand is kind of close to everything, and I just find it's more comfortable. That's what it comes down to, comfort. For this project, I'm going to be using some leftover cherry. I went ahead and milled it up to 3/4 inches thick, 1.5 inches wide, and about 6 inches long. And that's kind of common for a lot of the projects I do, just because it fits fellow vices, and it's good, just good practice size for all your exercises. Now, unfortunately, you know, Veritas, Lee Valley is a Canadian company, and the instructions they sent me are in millimeters. The distances to figure out the angles. It took me forever to find any kind of ruler in my shop that had any kind of millimeters. I finally found this one right here. Now, they don't really say it, but assume that the bottom is the base and you're measuring up, because, you know, the farther out you go, the farther it sends out, the lower the angle is. The shorter it is, it's going to be steeper. So there we go. And I do want to have the 25 degrees and a 30 degrees. So to get the 25, we have to measure up right at 50 millimeters or 5 centimeters. Now, it is incredibly important that when you're going for accuracy, you use tools that you trust. I use a wooden square simply because I can retrue this up really easy and make it perfect, or perfect enough for woodworking. I also highly suggest that instead of a pencil, you use a knife, because a knife, it not only will make a finer line, but it will make a line that you can feel. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over, make that initial measurement of 50 millimeters. I'm on something. 50 millimeters, and I'm just going to make a nick. Okay. Now, if you're slightly angled at all, understand that will change your measurement, but really at this point in time, this distance right here, we're going more for consistency, and if I'm a few millimeters off here or there, I don't think it'll matter that big a difference. Now, I'm going to place that knife with my flat edge right here, because I want a crisp line on this way. I don't mind if there's a bevel on this side. And then I'm going to bring my square up to it, and I'm going to make the lightest of scratches. Hear that? Then a little heavier, then a little heavier, then a little heavier, and then heavier still, and make this quite a few times. The idea is, if you make a heavy cut right off the get-go, what's going to happen is the wood is going to want equalized pressure on both sides. And you'll notice that if you have an angle on this side and a straight on that side, equalizing the pressure will make the knife want to come out at an angle. By putting that slightest of scratch, you create a backstop for the knife. And then each consecutive time, it's using that backstop. And this edge right here becomes slightly beveled. Now, when I'm going for accuracy, I also mark the sides. I'm going to be coming halfway down here, so what I would do, if you can see that right there, that's a good display. See, it's beveled on this side and straight on that side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my square. I'm going to run my knife until it fits into that knife wall. And then I can bring my square up to it. That way I know I'm getting a perfect transfer. And then once again, light, medium, heavy, super heavy. Same thing on this side. Drag it. I can't even see it, but I can feel it when it pops into that knife wall. Come back over, make sure it's flat against the square. 1, 2, 3. And I should have a perfect line going around. Next step, we're going to deepen that wall, that brace, with our chisel. And to do that one, I like to refer down to my bench hooks because we're going to be sawing anyways in the future. So we're going to be using these. I like them because if you're clamping it down, you have to remove the clamps a bunch. This way, you just move it around. So what I want to do is I want to create a ramp on this side. So I'll put the back, a few millimeters or 1/16 and just press forward. Now you want to be careful. You notice I kind of wiggled it in because if you press too far, you can split the wood out. I do know people that are scared of doing that one. A lot of them will take their chisels or a knife or something like that and just kind of whittle down to that baseline. That does take a little bit more skill and I find it less precise. So I prefer just kind of to wiggle it down to that baseline, and that creates a nice ramp. And you can hear it, it hits. Boom, there we go. If I'm going for ultimate precision, I would also do that on these side pieces right here. Whoops, I forgot to mark my center line. We'll get to that right now. Now to mark your center line, I am kind of lazy in that I don't want to actually do the measurements. What I would do is I would typically take my marking gauge, okay? I will place it on the corner, eyeballing the center. And because it's got that little tiny wheel, it will kind of knife into that one. Then I can just bring this up. My gauge has a micro adjuster. I talked about this in an earlier Tool Friday video. So I lock that down and now I will lock the collet. The key thing I want to do is make sure I leave a space right here so that I can move this back and forth to make any kind of adjustments. So now simply take your thing, mark it from one side, flip it, mark it from the other, and then that distance in there is what you need to fix. And it's a lot easier to get the center of that line than it is from these two outside points. So what I can now do is I can loosen this up. I want to bring this back, so I just twist the head until it gets right in the center of those two lines. Then I'll lock the head again. Then I'll do another test. Flip it. And when I make the same line, maybe a little bit more, when I make the same line, I know I am in the dead center. There we go. So now, just mark my line all the way around, referencing the same face in case I'm even messed up centering it. Always plan for your incompetence. Now, because I own a fine-tooth crosscut saw, that is what I'm going to be using. But if you don't have a fine-tooth crosscut saw, just use the finest tooth saw you have and don't worry about it. You'll get the job done. Now, when you're doing precision work, one of the key rules is you only want to saw what you can see. I can see this line right here. I can see the line on this side. I cannot see this line, so I don't want to worry about that side, so I'm not going to saw here. I'm actually going to use the slope that we created as my saw fence. Now, it is nice to grow your index nail out a little bit so you can kind of use an extended fence right there if you know you're going to be doing a lot of sawing. This is one of the few situations where I'm going to tell you to nibble, because if you're going for the ultimate control, I'm not really worried about clearing sawdust out of these teeth as it builds up there. I just want to stay on that line. I'm not really worried about depth. So I'm going to start on this far corner and I'm going to nibble my way all the way across, and I'm working on the toe instead of the heel because it's too easy to put a lot of pressure on this side, whereas it's very easy not to put much pressure on this side. So, right here, I'm in the cut, I'm in the slope. I'm just going to nibble my way across using this finger as a guide to bring it all the way around here. Once I have that established, notice I have not gone down on this side really much past what my knife created. Now I'm going to focus coming down here, just following that line. I've created enough of a curve for my saw that I don't really have to worry about that anymore. This is also a time when you can really take advantage of a good quality saw. Have you ever wondered why they put these curves on the bottoms of the handles of your joinery saws? It's so you can actually use that on your workbench. And notice what my goal right now is to saw a diagonal from this point down here. As I ride it up to keep it in that point, it kind of increases the angle. So it gets a little bit more aggressive, and then it stops me, so I'm not going to be blowing through it. So it just gives you a lot more control than you would actually think. So as I'm sawing through, I'm just going to focus on taking nice long strokes, not putting much pressure, and then watching this line right here. And I want you to watch how my saw rides on the handle. In there, as I come down, all of a sudden I'm now riding on the handle, and it just keeps it nice and even. And notice it comes up on back here, so I don't have to worry about that backside. Voila! I'm now at my baseline here, so now I'm going to use an underarm stroke, flip it around, and do the same exact thing, connecting this top corner down with the baseline over here. Just like that. Now I can flip it back and keeping the saw level, saw out the pyramid in the middle. There we go. We have probably the most accurate cut I can make with a handsaw. Well, pardon me. I probably could have done a little bit better if I wasn't filming, but the most accurate techniques. At this point in time, I want to saw off that cheek, which you do it in a lot of different joinery, so it's great practice. So I'm now going to use a rip cutting sash saw. I'm switching to the deeper saw simply because my other saw wouldn't come all the way down. I like something that can go at least past where I want to saw. That's where this is great for that one. Though, if you don't have any other saw than the saw you made with this, just cut it as deep as it will go, and the wood will split along the grain just fine. Don't worry about it. Just use the tool you have. You're also going to see me switch over to my twin screw to hold the work to saw on. Just use any kind of clamp you have. I just prefer this kind for this particular task. But the key thing is, I want you to position it in a way so that the saw can come in the gap somewhat. So you don't risk ruining your clamp as if I was sawing this way. It'll make your life a lot easier. The reason why I like a twin screw is because I can clamp it on this side very easily and then really cinch it up on this side. This now is not moving. In fact, this clamp is kind of pivoted, so it's too big to move back that way. So I'm now going to be removing this side of my work. So what I want to do is the same exact thing. I want to saw a triangle down to my baseline, only sawing what I can see. The big difference is, though, I'm not going to be starting on this side and working my way across and then coming down. The reason being, if you understand it, the grain is now a different direction. We're not going across the grain, we're actually going with the grain. If I'm to saw down on this side, it's going to be very hard for me to keep it going because I'm actually going against unsupported fibers. I'm going against the grain. Whereas if I saw up this way, I'm actually planing with the fibers, and it'll be very, very easy to cut. Very easy to start, and it will feel a lot smoother and give me a lot more control. So when I'm working for my ultimate cut, I'll use my finger, the nibbling action, to get it going. Notice I wasn't making full strokes, I was just getting the accurate. Now I'm going to lock it in this corner and I'm going to come all the way down to my base. This time I'm focusing on making full strokes because I want the sawdust to come out of the gullets. There we go. Loosen it up, flip it around. If you want to, you can angle it a little bit now. And, well, here's a good example. Notice I'm dead on the line over here. Now see that? Zoom in as close as I can. On this side, I got a little off, just a tad bit off the line. That's why you only saw what you can see. I couldn't see this line. I could see this line. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to fix this problem because I don't have to, I've basically removed all that material up top here, but nothing down here. It's starting right there. So I can actually come back up here, reset my saw line, and then clear off all the waste, and it'll match up in the middle. So as you can see, I'm a little bit off the line on this side, no big deal. So I can now use this kerf, which is pretty much on the line all the way across, maybe a tad bit off right there. That's what caused the problem. Well, if I just reset it, and I'm going to use this finger to press the blade over a little bit, starting up top. And here we go. Let's come down that line. Just nice, easy saw strokes on the beginning. There we go. Come back up if you get off the line, no big deal. And there we go. We've now established back onto the line. I'm in the curve, so everything will work out just fine. At which point I can now right it up and take it off. There we go. Now hand saw cuts are not going to leave the smoothest finish. We want it to look good, so let's smooth it out. And to do that, I am going to use a card scraper instead of sandpaper. Let me show you why. If I use sandpaper to flatten this out, maybe a sanding block or just regular sandpaper on thing, I have a tendency to roll over the edges. And if you're doing this for joinery and it's in a joint that shows, you will see that little chamfer right there. It'll be a little black dot. I really want to keep this as flat as possible. The advantage of the card scraper is you're utilizing a straight edge. So as I go around, it's very unlikely I'm going to round over that because the card scraper itself will not flex around those corners. A lot of people stress about how to sharpen a card scraper. I'm going to show you my way of doing it, and I just find it fairly quickly. And it all comes down to what type of edge I want. Now I'm going to totally remove whatever burrs I have on this one right here using a mill file, just to show you I'm starting from scratch. So if I come over here and take it across this mill file, I'm not only flattening it, but I'm removing any kind of fine burr I had in the past. Now here's the thing. This right here creates a burr. I can now make shavings with this. It's a very coarse burr. So it's not going to give you a finish ready surface, but you know, you have coarse, medium, fine, and it will not last forever. So what we want to do is refine that burr. So what I'm actually going to do is stick it on my finest grit paper, diamond stone right here, and I'm going to remove it. So hopefully I end up with two sides of this card scraper that are at perfect 90 degrees. No burrs on them at all. Okay? And then, working my way down all these stones, I like to make sure I get a perfect 90 degrees, so I will find something that is at 90 degrees. This right here will work just fine, and just rest it up against that, and then sharpen it a little bit. Go through the grit, and you will notice you will probably develop a little bit of burr just using these. If you're doing this on Waterstones, I suggest you constantly move because you will just kind of knife into those stones. If you feel now, you'll have the slightest of burrs here. Now I'm just going to lay it on the edge of my workbench. I'm going to take my burnisher, my particular one I believe is tungsten or magnesium or something like that, and I'm going to lay it down flat. I'm going to kind of move off to the side this way. I'm going to take whatever burr on there, I'm going to fold it over forward, just like that. Doesn't take too long. And now I'm going to take it, holding it, I'm going to start out working it back and forth flat. Then I'm going to slowly come over this way, and then I'm going to slowly come over that way, and that's going to create my working burr. And it's this fast when I do it. And if you watch the reflection, you can actually see it develop. There we go. And I now have a working burr. So to remove the saw marks, I can just whittle them off. See the shavings coming off and flying away because I got the fan on? One thing is though, notice sometimes I'm going at this angle, sometimes I'm going at that angle. If you do it at the same angle, you'll end up getting ripples. You want the scraper to ride over the ripples. And there we go, a nice surface finish. And while you're at it, might as well clean up the whole thing. It's pretty easy with the card scraper. Card scrapers, a lot cheaper than sandpaper in the long run, because you can skip a lot of the rougher grits and just go straight to the fine stuff. A skill worth learning. Rinse and repeat on the second one with the second measurement, and you are now done. You have two working jigs. Only thing that's left to do is to cosmetically dress them up, which I'll challenge you to do. I'll put some pictures on how mine turned out at the end of the video, and I will put them on my Instagram account. If you can make yourself a set of these, please go tag me on Instagram and show me what you did. And when you're done, I want you to remember that it's always worth the effort to learn new stuff, create new things, and share them with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.